a Build Hatch developed production.
Well, that was another Build Hatch episode with myself and Ollie from Wood Melbourne. As you heard, we were talking about the barriers and logistical issues which exist in the current building and construction climate. These are exactly the issues that we're about to help resolve shortly, so stay tuned for these exciting new announcements over the coming weeks. We want to help and support the industry and continue to give back. Like I said, stay tuned. And by the way, not that he needs it, but if you are listening to this and you like Wood Melbourne's products, let's give him a Google review because Ollie certainly deserves it. What a character Ollie is, and as you could probably tell, I absolutely love sitting down and talking to Ollie about a lot of things construction. As usual, please check out our Instagram page and other socials where you'll be able to learn more about our guests and some of the features of the work that we talk about. Have a great week, and you'll hear me again on the airwaves next week. Thanks for listening to another episode of Build Hatch. Ollie from Wood Melbourne, welcome to Build Hatch.
Thanks, Aaron. Nice to be here.
Now, we're recording this in your Melbourne showroom, and I'm really looking forward to this one. So, like all our guests on Build Hatch, we always like to take it back to the very beginning and hear about our guests' past and how they got into their industry. So, did you grow up here in Melbourne?
I did. I grew up in Fitzroy, in central Melbourne. Pretty cool, sort of hip little place back then. Or it's a little bit rough around the edges. You know, it was a good place to grow up.
Urban, sort of hip, sort of cultural, real cultural place.
Yeah, a bit of a melting pot. Had a bit of everything. It was actually really fun. I think that sort of that edginess back then as a kid. Doing a little bit of exploring through the nicer spots and also into the sort of the more of the ghetto-y spots. It was a bit of an adventure.
So you could kind of just, as a kid back then, I guess, walk around, wander around and be safe and comfortable, just exploring, really.
Yeah, and we did a lot of skateboarding, me and my brother, and we had like a little crew of us, so we'd always sort of knock about together. There was always kids around. We were always out. We were always about doing different things, skating into the city or, just out exploring. So it was good fun, and it was pretty sort of free, and Mum and Dad were pretty cool with that, sort of letting us off. And I think Dad was sort of at the belief that sort of like the more you did, and in some ways the more trouble you got into, the more you learnt. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Typical grassroots sort of stuff. So what were you like at school?
Honestly, pretty shit. Look, I really liked school. I think, there were certain things that I got and certain things that I didn't get. So I wasn't like a total doofus at school. I did try quite hard. And the things that sort of got me, I really, really enjoyed. And that's sort of from primary school right through high school. But then there were some things that I was that kid that if it didn't make sense to me, I'd be frustrated. Probably ADHD, to be honest. And it was just like, if it didn't make sense, I'd be like, what is the point? But that said, I remember sort of having to go at a maths teacher in year 11, I think about trigonometry or something, and sort of like maybe even saying out loud, like, when are we ever going to use this? And then a couple of years later, building a staircase going, okay, this is where we use it. So had to sort of bite my tongue there a little bit. But yeah. If she's listening, thanks, Tracy Von Arx.
Very good. So, like, I guess going through school, we've all experienced a bit of that. So did you have any idea, like, were you leaning towards a particular field of study or getting an apprenticeship? Like, how did you sort of go through that process?
I think I was my dad was a builder, and we grew up moving a fair bit. And I think I was sort of like, I wouldn't want to do that. Like almost a little bit of a snobby attitude, I reckon, as a high schooler. And then I guess from high school, I was probably more focused on wanting to do something sort of art and design, but not really clear. Like I did like having a bit of a muck around making things, anything from sort of skateboard ramps to, not so much furniture and things like that, but a little bit of sculptural kind of stuff. So I was sort of more drawn to art at high school. Typical looking for the bludgier subjects, but I really liked using my hands. I knew that from early on. That's sort of what I would definitely wanted to do something with my hands. But I didn't really have a clear direction, to be honest. And when I finished high school, I started working with my dad, sort of just labouring and things like that. And it was from there I sort of started to see the building industry, I guess, in a bit of a more exciting scope than kind of just, I think I saw it earlier on as a bit of a drab sort of, hard work thing. And then once I actually got into it, it sort of really, it drew me in pretty hard, pretty quickly. And it was kind of, and it wasn't just, it was easy for me to do that because I could go and work with my dad. He'd drive me to work every day. He'd wake me up. Like it was real, like easy stuff to, the work was hard, but I couldn't have had a better job at a better time in my life. When you're 18 and all you're only wanting to do is go out and party, and then you can get
And
woken up in the
sleep.
morning and sleep, and you could literally get that last 10 minutes in before the knock was on the door. So I milked that for every bit that I could. So I'm still quite proud of that. But no, it was really good, and I think that getting that excitement and seeing those builds that Dad did. So he would design and build his own stuff, and a lot of the time we'd do client work as well. But that sort of energy was really contagious to me, like seeing Dad in that zone. Okay, we can put this in here, and having that freedom. I think that was what probably captured me first in terms of, and that could have gone any way too, like any sort of occupation. I think being able to have that creative freedom was something that I was like, shit, you can live your life like this. And seeing your dad do it, you kind of instilled that confidence to go and do what you wanted to do. And at the time, it was, I was really drawn to the building scope of things, and it was great, really good.
Was it renovations?
A lot of it in the earlier days when I first started was new developments, sort of like 2-3 units in inner Melbourne. So the first few spots I worked with Dad were in North Melbourne. One was an old horse stables that he bought and divided up into 3 or 4 units, I think. So they were kind of, when I say it like that, you think, oh, shit, that sounds pretty run-of-the-mill. But he'd go with sort of themes.
No, it doesn't. It's kind of, it almost has an element of quirkiness about it.
It was quite quirky. So he'd do these kind of themes. He'd travel a lot through America and through Mexico. And around those early 90s, he was like right into this sort of Mexican thing. And like to the point where he'd get a blowtorch out on some old pine flooring and he'd torch it, and then they'd put a blue stain through it to sort of get that Aztec blue thing. And like a lot of them didn't work. But a lot of them did, and the ones that did work were really cool. So it sort of developed from there. So he was mainly multi-res kind of stuff, and then it moved through into the mid-90s. He started building in the city, and it sort of started with within the vein of doing a couple of units, and it sort of evolved into him buying airspace, so existing rooftops, and started building up there, and that's when I was, with him from, through those early stages. And that's sort of when the excitement levels of that was like, this is the sort of stuff that I was sort of hearing about or thinking would only happen in like New York or Paris or London or, all those cool, when you're at that age, all those places are pretty romantic. You're like, shit, I want to get over there and see what that's like. And being able to sort of do what I thought was something that happened over there here was really exciting. And he was one of the first to sort of do that multi-res. But you could buy rooftops back then. People didn't know what to do with them. So you could pick up a rooftop for next to nothing and they'd be like, well, if you fix the leaks, it's yours for whatever, 50, 60 grand, and we'd put 4 or 5 units up there, craning stuff up, big scaffoldings around it. And, and they weren't huge, or they were just cute, and they were sort of really well designed. They functioned, nothing too over the top. We did a couple of over the top ones later on, but, that, and the same thing, it keeps sort of feeding back into that sort of passion of something that you had free reign on and had full creativity with. And, he started discovering all sorts of wacky products. Not even wacky, but, things that,
they weren't mainstream off
right.
the shelf.
And a lot of the things that sort of have stemmed now into the building industry, such as acoustic floors and acoustic walls and furring channels and things like that, which, back in the 90s, it was maybe used in a commercial sense, but very rarely used in a residential sense, and hence a lot of people saying city apartments are shit because you've literally got one stud wall, or you didn't have staggered stud walls, you didn't have independent walls of each other, or straight concrete. So he was kind of, it wasn't exactly like reinventing the wheel, but he was sort of using what was available in a different kind of way. And I think that was sort of one of the big sort of draw cards of it being quite exciting because it was new.
Yeah, I love it. And I think literally it's thinking outside of the box kind of thinking.
Yeah. So I think, the sort of almost going back to sort of, I reckon that was sort of gifted to me in a way from Dad, that I've always sort of had that sort of, when you grow up with something like that, it's just sort of, it becomes your second nature. It's just, you just sort of see things that
you think
way.
it's normal.
That's right. So we've sort of always, why couldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you do that? Some people would be like, oh, no, you can't do that. And I guess in some ways it's probably a bit of a driving force in my sort of cheeky behaviour to be like, nah, fuck, we can do that. Let's do it. So, excuse the French, but yeah, you know what I mean?
No, I love it. Yeah. You're kind of growing up
Mhm.
morphing from becoming a teenager into a young man, and you're working on these cool projects. So what did you do then? Like, did you continue working with your dad?
Yeah, I did. Well, so straight out of high school, I worked with dad. So I'll sort of rewind a bit. Yeah, so straight out of high school, had a year off basically working and went traveling. So worked for about 6 months. Went overseas for 3 or 4 months. I think I ran out of money pretty quick. Did the phone call probably in the second month. Mum, Dad need some cash. So I did a bit of travel, and that was sort of what I'd set out to do. Came back and sort of thought, there's a whole world out there. I don't know if labouring sort of, as much as I was enjoying it, I thought I might sort of try and get into something a bit different. I went back and did like a year 13 at Swinburne in Hawthorn, which was kind of, I guess, my idea of like, all right, let's sort of branch into a couple of things that I didn't do in year 12. So a lot more industrial design, some sort of more sculptural art, media studies, photography, things like that I sort of had a passion for at the time. And it's sort of, as that went, I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it enough to sort of further my study. So I did the year 13. I did enroll for furniture design and got into it at RMIT, but never took it up. And not necessarily a regret, because I sort of went down the construction path. And I think in a lot of ways that, even though I sort of don't have formal furniture building training, having the construction training and sort of working with vastly different materials that you wouldn't normally do in furniture, and sort of then end up coming back around, almost sort of open my eyes up to I guess, to a lot of different opportunities. Not to suggest 1 minute that formal training I think is probably one of the best things you can ever do, but in some way I think I'm kind of lucky that I've had like a bit of a broader view on things and taken in a little bit of everything, which certainly makes me no master furniture maker, but have the skills to do some pretty unique stuff that, I consider myself more than qualified to do some of the stuff.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to that open-mindedness and having that broad perspective, like
Yep.
it's not like you're doing something and not knowing about it. Like you're educating yourself in that process,
Yeah.
and certainly expanding your horizons in that area.
Yeah, and I've loved every minute of it. Like, there are a lot of things where I've like had, good thing there's no microphone in my workshop, because the F&C's coming out of there when things aren't working and stuff flying through. But I think that's also part of the part of the passion behind it, is to try and make these things work. And not everything does work. I've got a bunch of things on a shelf above my drop saw at the workshop that have never sort of made it for whatever reason, but always there as a little reminder, not as a downer reminder, but as a like, look at that, because one day something will click with that. It might be past its time by then. It might not be something that I'm.
It's there to inspire you.
That's right, and just the sort of nice little reminders, like not and not as failures, but as there will be a way, and something will come on. So it's just it's a nice little bit of inspiration to keep you going.
Yeah. Look, I love too on your website where you have a story about you being an inventor and late nights and
I've reread that recently and gone, what the hell was I thinking? But no, look, it still sort of stands.
I love it.
Yeah,
it
is. It's
It's
cool.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being an ideas man,
Yeah,
which is a good thing.
Yeah, it is. It's funny to reread those things. You sort of feel like a bit of a wanker sometimes when you go back through, because when we first set up Wood Melbourne, I had people sitting down there like, right, we're going to get all this down, we're going to get it all on paper, and it was buzzing, everyone's excited, and the stuff that came out then, it's still relevant. I stand by every bit of it, but when you reread things, it's like when you hear your voice on a recording, you're like, do I sound like that? It's the same sort of thing. But
you never get used to it.
No, you don't. But I think those sort of things are. They're also really good reminders, and I think for something that's now 8, maybe nearly 9 years old, to give yourself a little bit of a pat on the back, and I think it's super important to sort of go back to like the very basics of like Wood Melbourne started with this big chunky outlet that that I look at now and almost cringe, but it's also that evolution, that process. It's still part of what I am and what the business is. So it's it is. I think it's really important to sort of rewind and go back through those steps and sort of look at the steps you've made, look at the changes you've made, and and not and be proud of that. I think it's the business has gone for a long time. It's going quite well. We've definitely refined things down on so many levels, which is awesome. But
well, that's just a part of adapting and finding what
Exactly.
works
Yeah.
and what doesn't work.
Yeah,
And
and we still might sell a couple of the very, very first products. Like, I think just recently we did like one of them. We did a little package for someone with the wooden tap handles and the wooden bath spout, and still to this day, I love making it. It's 7 years on. It is the same product, slightly more refined, but it still gives me a smile.
now I want to talk about that shortly, and I'm excited to hear about these cool features and products that you're manufacturing. But people listening to this, they love the real stories about
Mm-hmm.
you starting off Wood Melbourne,
Yep.
So take us back, if you can, to that moment that you thought, I'm onto something here and
Okay.
working. How
Yep.
how did you commence from idea to getting your shop front, whether it was the early ones or the backyard sort of back shed sort of
Yep.
outfit? Take us through that. What were you thinking at the time?
All right, so it's actually a pretty cool story. So it started off where I'm sitting right now is my showroom, and we bought this where I am and next door as two shop fronts. And the idea was that we'd build a unit at the front up and over. So this has got relevance because that unit was where I decided that there was nothing in like the realm of the tap world industries or whatever you call it. There was nothing there that I saw that I liked, even the stuff with like $3,000 price tags. And I was kind of, this is sort of where it brewed because I was looking, and I probably wouldn't have parted with $3,000 to be honest on this little apartment. It was kind of like a little investment apartment that we were making, so it had to be designed and built nicely. It had to operate, and it needed a little bit of zing. So by the time I'd sort of got around to doing the upstairs, one of the bathrooms up there, my brother was there. He's a plumber, and he was doing some stuff. And he said to me, like, well, I can weld you something up in copper. And then I was like, oh, no, copper. I'm a bit over copper. All this exposed stuff that you see everywhere. And it's got its place. Don't get me wrong, but I was looking for something a little bit more finessed and a little bit less industrial. So anyway, I came up with after having that conversation, I said, yes, do it. Make me a copper outlet just through there. So he did that, and then I had the idea that like that night he can do it in copper, and I'll just cover it in timber because at this stage we were sort of like mucking around with a lot of shelves and stuff like that in wet areas. So we'd been using a lot of these hard wax oils to sort of treat timbers that were sort of within a shower area that we knew worked. So it was kind of necessity and kind of the whole essence of designing something that was going to be sort of quirky yet work. Once we'd finished building that place, we had no plans to have downstairs as a shop where I am now. It was sort of, so after showing a few people and they said, look, this is fucking amazing. Like, I've never seen anything like it. And I was kind of like, I think we'd had a housewarming party. So, a couple of champagnes. Yeah, whatever. Come on, I'll show you the kitchen now. And people kept getting drawn back to this thing. And they're saying, no, seriously, I've never seen anything like this. You should, you could make this as and this is an actual thing. So, the more people I sort of spoke to, and then, I guess I didn't get forced into it, but I was like, maybe there's something in this. So I went and spoke to a couple of guys, a couple of fitters, and got some like actual components made up so that rather than it being an actual fixture, I could make it as a fitting, so it could actually be attached. Lo and behold, back then didn't know much about wells and watermark. So, we could do a whole talk on that. So the first few were not watermarked. They were just me sort of mustering up some stuff. But then as the product sort of designed a little bit further down the track into that's something that was a feasible product, I got it all watermarked, got it licensed, got a design registration on it. So it was literally sort of starting from building in that apartment from an actual fixed fitting, if you will, to an actual screw-on fitting within the space of about 6 months, I think, maybe even less. Like I lived and breathed it. I was up at 3 a.m. I was doing drawings. I was cutting stuff up, wrong timber, nut wrong shape, like really, really going through it. My wife probably would have been close to leaving me, I think, because it was like bordering lunacy, but she's been magic. So yeah, and so that's kind of it. Literally, that was sort of how it started from that concept to the one product. Literally, Wood Melbourne started from one product, and looking back at that, you think that is insane. Like that, not only is that insane, it's borderline stupid because you're starting something, and the first thing everyone says is, "Oh, it's timber and water." So I was really kind of pushing shit uphill to to get it happening. But very, very quickly we got a lot of traction with. I think I'd started an Instagram account, and we had some people come in and professionally shoot it, and it sort of it didn't go viral, but it kind of did. You know, there was enough inquiries from the first few photos to sort of go, shit, this might actually work. And then I had the shop down here, and we'd finished building upstairs. So I put a little wall in. I clad a little a bath I think I had left over, like a shitty acrylic bath. I clad it in timber and put a little pump in there, tiled it, and put this little outlet on it, and had it running 24/7. You know,
like a feature, a water feature.
Yeah, so sort of it became a showroom. You know, and it was literally what this is: 3.5 meters wide by about 1.5 deep. Just a little bath and a couple of outlets on the wall, and then you know. From that, I was hungry. I was super hungry for more ideas, and it literally just, pardon the pun, but it flowed from there. It was, you know, next thing was taps, and shit like, you know, if bath spouts were in comparison was easy because, you know, I worked out a system to make that work. But when it came to taps, how do you retrofit? What sort of ceramic discs? What is a ceramic disc? You know, like it's so much Googling. So. You know, bit by bit, I managed to, and the taps probably did take me the longest to work out something that was multifunctional on so many different levels: wall mount, hob mount, in shower, out shower. But the list goes on and on and on.
And did you have to, like, what about the research that you had to do? I mean, you said you're up till 3 a.m. in the night. You're drawing and stuff like that. Like, did you have to research? Okay, what sort of timber? Like, it's obviously used heavily in the marine environment. So what sort of species of timber works well? And then you've got soaps and all sorts of stuff.
So many different. I'd kind of done a lot of that research previously. We did a lot with Dad and also my own projects. Heaps of timber shelves in showers, little nooks, little recesses, and things like that. So we knew that the product and the way to sort of treat the timber with like an acrylic sealer first, and then the hard wax oil to allow it to sort of breathe off and allow it to sort of move and adjust to things like that, but not actually soak in water was the key. So also the positioning, like knowing, like making a product and saying you have to wipe this dry every time you use it. No one's going to use it, you know, unless it's a standalone baths kind of thing, you know, in which case it's just sort of a one-off. So there was heaps of research, and a lot of that was already done in terms of timber species and how to go about sealing it. So I was confident that I knew what I was doing with that. Where a lot of the research came in was luckily through working in the industry for so long, having a lot of plumbing contacts, a lot of plumbing supply contacts, so I could look into sort of not so much regulations, yes, but like componentry and parts and finding things that would work so that I could make them. But that was the you know, huge amounts of trial and error with existing bits and pieces in terms of fittings and fixtures and things like that to sort of work out what parts I needed, who I could get to make these sort of, you know, the working parts, then getting them watermarked. You know, knowing half of that stuff 6 months, a year into it, you know, you'd have to sort of question shit. Was, you know, there was like once we were in, so we had to just sort of come up to speed with it all. But it was a steep learning curve. So yeah,
there's a lot in it, and I mean, you mentioned watermark. So for the people who are listening to this who don't understand what watermarking means, just explain what that process is.
So watermarking is basically a certificate to say that the product is safe and licensed to use and being tested and approved by pretty much an Australian standard. So watermarking will allow a product as a fitting or a fixture to be used in an Australian dwelling or a house in a bathroom setting. So it's basically anything that has potable water, or actually any water at all run through it, has to be Wells. Wells is more a Victorian thing, but watermarked, which basically means it's been independently assessed and safe to use.
And so you would have had to have had some sort of hydraulics consultant to test it, sign off on it, basically.
Every product we do has to be independently assessed and passed. So there's different tests they do for different things. So the watermark, they independently test for certain things. So like, say, for example, a tap handle will have to be tested for, they do a pull-off test to see how many, I can't remember, it's like a magic number. It's like 67 kilos or something the tap has to withstand without breaking. Now, I don't know if that means if you slip over in the shower and you grab the tap, that's what that's designed to do. I don't know the exact specifics, but I can tell you there's like reports that we get that I glaze over. Like, I'm terrible. I get a letter from, like, you know, and I read it and like, let's summarize it. But
do. It's like waiting to get into, some sort of course or program, and you're skipping all the jargon
Yep.
for the thanks for applying. But
yeah.
am I successful or
Yeah,
not?
just give me the tick. Do we get the tick? So, and luckily, like we've got guys that work for us now who help us through every bit of that process, which has been basically working with certain companies and things like that. We've now got people who so I've got a very good understanding now of how these things work and what is needed to make them pass. So 7 years in, the first few were like, actually the first handles all passed the pull-off test, because that was the thing. They were like, this is not going to pass in a million years, like especially the concrete ones. They're like, these things are just going to fall apart. And then when they get onto it, then you get the email. They're like, what do you made these things out of? And I'm like, well, that's why I'm making them, not you, buddy. But it's it's
Now this is important, right? So you don't, you'll be listening to this and you haven't had time probably to pause and reflect, but these are the real stories, right? Stories like you
Yep.
who sitting there having this idea, and you think, like you're not sitting there thinking, well, is there money in knobs and different components and taps? Like, we're not talking gold here. And and so you've had this passion and drive. Midnight thoughts go by and you're thinking, well, I thought about that last week and yesterday, and then you're starting to think about it all the time and you can't get it off your mind, and then you think, I'm going to go out and give this a go, give it a punt.
Mm-hmm.
And then, then there's another, you can't just bring a tap fitting or a knob onto the market and think I'll just start selling these. Even doesn't matter how passionate you are.
Yep.
You've then got to go through another hoop and another hoop and get all these tests done. And I take my hat off to you for having a crack to go through that step. It's like, seriously, when you think about what's involved to do that, like it takes so much time and effort, and we're not even talking about money here.
No, you've spent so much money before you've even looked at putting a product to market, and that is still to this day probably one of the hardest things that. Just to rewind and to be honest with you, I reckon if I knew what I needed to do to get Wood Melbourne up to speed at the time of starting, I probably wouldn't have done it. In all honesty,
you wouldn't have done it. No,
my naivety has been my asset for the first time in my life. My pig-headedness
and drive and determination.
It's just like, I'm not stopping. We're this far in, and in some ways, it's been fantastic because I've met people along the way who. I think maybe that passion and that drive has really, like, people were like, come and talk, like, what do you need,
So what are some of the key highlighted products that you guys are well known for?
Well, I think it's from the start, I think we got known for the timber bath outlet was probably that was the first product we released. And that got a hell of a lot of publicity and a lot of, magazines and blog coverage and things like that. And at the start was probably one of the key things. Like, it was exciting, like it was new. I felt like we were doing something good. There was a lot of appreciation for it. And to be honest with you, there was fuck sales. there was, I was subcontracting as a carpenter in between. I was full moonlighting, but the passion was real. It was there. And I sort of had this greater vision for, this timber. And looking back at it, you think that's, mate, you're borderline loony bin with that kind of stuff, because, it's timber, it's a bath spout, you're not selling that many of them. Luckily, we were doing a lot of it. I had a little workshop set up at the back of the house. So there weren't too many overheads with things like that. I had all of my tools already. So, I wasn't investing shitloads of money with those kind of things. I already had the skills. I had the area. It was what I was doing was sort of small scale. So, sorry, I've sort of gone off track there a little bit.
No, look, I love the graciousness part of that story, because I know what it's like when you do something and you get a lot of publicity for it.
Yep.
And people are saying, geez, Ollie, must be amazing. And you've
like,
made
buy
this.
One. No, sorry.
And in your head, you're thinking, geez, I wish it was taking off.
Yeah. And, like you'd sort of, and from Instagram, people are probably thinking I'm like helicoptering out to the Yarra Valley for caviar when I'm like ringing people saying, hey, I'm going to be like a couple of weeks late on that payment, But, it's that was the reality of it. But sorry, to sort of go back to your question, I think what really happened, I think, was in some ways we kind of went, not arse about it. It happened the way it happened, but we kind of went off with a bang with sort of like a fairly novelty product, I guess, in reality now, looking back at it. And then the evolution was kind of when the products were a little bit more refined, Then things sort of started to kick off. So, like, classic example was like the Maddie Basin, which is probably one of our best sellers. I made literally with some bits of form ply and poured some compression grout into to do for a photo shoot for my concrete handles, because it was the same sort of very, very similar looking textured concrete. Compression grout wouldn't last a minute in a real life scenario. So people were seeing these photos of this, very square, sort of very modular looking basin, saying, how much are they? So, the business mind of me went, fuck, we've got to make these. So quickly sort of rung around, got onto some people to say, look, can you manufacture these for me? And that was kind of where, at the start, I was very much, I wanted to do everything myself, and I still do to an extent, but it's also about doing the things that I can do well and other people do way, way better. You get those people.
That's a pretty hard discipline
to
have,
the hardest thing I ever had to learn, because I was like, no, what happens if it's not right? If I'm wrong, I want to be wrong, not say to someone, oh, sorry, that's the guy that makes my basins is fucked up or whatever, so like that. So, quickly made some good contacts. And I think that's where Instagram was probably, but back then I still sort of think that it was such a handy tool. A lot of people who are into what you're doing are reaching out. People who are making other things are reaching out. You make, some good contacts on there of like-minded people, which just gives you that sort of community to start off with. But then further than that, you could sort of branch out and approach people and say, hey, I really like what you're doing with this. Would you be interested in doing this for me or whatever? Now, that was probably the hardest step, and probably one of the smartest things I've ever done in terms of my business, was to reach out to other people and start to get other things made by other people.
Yeah, right.
Because then
collaborate, basically.
Yes, and then get like certain components made by certain people, and really, but that moment was probably when I think a lot of my stuff really sort of set for me the model of business and the quality of product really lifted, because it went from sort of like, and this is me being very honest, it went from kind of like a bit of more of a backyard kind of operation to something that was a lot more precision. We went to something that, things were joined up much, much better. I was getting things laser cut. I was getting things water jet cut. I was getting brass milled, and everything was locking together. I'd just fine tune it and put it together. And it went from something that was like, let's say, like, I don't have one here, but like the timber tap, which would be even, hand finesse down to as nice as you could get it, would still have some, which I still, some quirks, which I think were beautiful, but to something that is like refined like that.
Yeah, right.
Timber in a brass casing. Like, that was the difference. Like, that is just out of the box, fucking beautiful still to this day, probably 6-7 years old.
Absolutely.
But, and I think that step was something that I'd never had done before, other than like in construction. Okay, you get the electrician to do the wiring, you get the plumber to do the plumbing, but this was kind of on a slightly different level, because this felt like I was sort of giving part of my soul out, because I guess I do really have that passion for it, and then being able to like put your trust and things like that into other people making those parts. But in all honesty, when we did find the right people and get the right things happening, it sort of led its own path. Things were better, things were quicker. There was, and it just opened up doors to pretty much all my new products have gone off that base of like, right, can I get some, other people to do certain things, and always trying to keep it as local as possible. Most of the stuff, to be honest, is sort of within a 50-kilometre radius.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And like, and this sort of comes back to the same thing where people, really two different sort of walks. People have the, fuck, that's expensive. And then I don't say anything, because if they think it's expensive, they don't know what's involved. When you can go to Reese or TradeLink and buy a set of taps off the shelf that have been made on a massive production line that have not touched one person's hands, that have come off a line, and they're $500 in a box, to a pair of them for like maybe $600 that have gone through literally blood, sweat and tears. And, handcrafted, but handcrafted to a sort of a high level. So it's not sort of like that rustic shit, which people go, oh, that's rustic and nice, which some days it's not. This is a fairly refined piece. A lot of time I did a little interview with a year 12 student a while ago, and they were sort of saying, it's not a product, it's kind of art. And I was kind of like, you're kind of right in a way, like it is.
I totally agree. And I was actually going to say to you earlier, like, how do you manage that that process, because you are, in my mind, an artist. Like, these products stand for themselves in that these are unique product offerings.
Yep.
And I think, and that's going to be the theme of this podcast. And you and I have been talking about this, in that being accessible and getting things out there in our construction community, because you and I both know that these significant price increases for, let's call it, the shit that's out there, you'd be surprised now, and this is what happens with inflation and economies of scale and everything that's been going on since COVID, is why aren't we producing these things on our home soil?
It's been
putting more power back into the people.
Yep, it's been our business model from the get-go. I have always seen, I guess, I've always wondered, and it's very simple, but I've wondered, why don't we make things here? And it comes down to one thing: big greedy companies. It's not because they've got morals or no morals or whatever. If you have something that's made, mass produced, and they're not paying high wages, which they consider us Aussies to be high wages, which, I guess on a global scale, they are. But you look at then the price of products from something that was made here to something that is now made offshore, that price never came down. When it was cheaper to make, that price never came down. And this is where you start to think we are being fucking stooged day in, day out. Sorry, because I'm also passionate about this. And
same.
People have, over the years of probably having such fucking good quality of life over here, have not had to bother about thinking about it. And in some ways, that sort of naivety, I can't even say, is a wonderful thing, because we are in such a, but also it means that we're so sort of, held in on not being able to sort of see past our noses, which, is in some ways, it's a romantic, lovely place to be, because everything's safe and everyone can afford certain things, or most people can afford things, and we have a very, very high standard of living, which, should not be knocked, or that's something to be very, very proud of. But when that sort of gets pushed to the side to be like, you're actually getting stooged, then I start to think, well, fuck, that's ridiculous. So, is my product, this sort of goes on to, is my product expensive? I still don't think it's expensive, not compared to what you're getting for what you're paying, if that makes sense. So I think for what you're paying, and I know this because I get approached very often by companies overseas, mainly in China, with a catalogue saying, I can sell you this product for $17 a piece if you buy 50 of them. And I've seen the exact same product in the shop for $600.
Yeah.
So either they're charging that person about 1,000% more than me, and then they're doubling it, or there's something not quite right with the way things get imported. Now, then people can also say, well, they're putting their balls on the line to import huge quantities. It's a big investment. It is. I agree. I understand how business works. There's markups. There's all these sorts of things. But I think where the markups become business, and then you've got huge sort of opportunities lost here because they claim, because of high wages, then I think it's a pity. I mean, I can run a very, very small business. Okay, fair enough. It employs me, doesn't employ many other people. A lot of sort of, I get specialist contractors doing sort of like bits and pieces for me. They're all local. I can afford it, and I can still sell a product like that. If I was to up that scale, we would probably lose the charm of the product. So it's been a decision of ours to keep things made as local as possible, and not necessarily just on a small scale. I'm happy to do big scale where I can. But, I think it's a bit of a myth that things can't be made here. That's the longest way I could possibly have told you that. But I think
totally agree.
Things can be made here, and they can be made here with good quality and for profit.
Well, and this is what's killing our industry, because what's happening now is the little guys getting screwed into 90-day payment terms.
Yep.
They're delivering. They're able to organise courier just by not being lazy. They're able to think outside the square. We've now got contractors that have a job, that are getting decent wages, that are working under, a kind of Uber style arrangement, where they're getting paid to freelance, travel around and deliver things. So they're thinking outside the square and organising to deliver things on time.
Yep.
The laziness of the logistics, plus the hierarchy that exists at that top level, that's getting in the way of people like you, hardworking battlers out there, having a go, doing something they love with their passion, and producing a really beautiful local product that's putting wages and taxes back into the
Yep.
economy.
Yep.
You're doing it. You're able to do it, but yet the end user can't get things for 3 months, or
Yeah.
we've got bottlenecks in the system, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get rid of this and
And
put it back into the people.
I think COVID, in some ways, has been fantastic at bringing this and addressing this to a head, because now all of a sudden, a couple of, well, what are we, nearly 2 years in, and logistics are really good. People are starting to see the actual fact of, like, as things start to slow down, people can't get new cars, people can't get, people are struggling to get timber on some building sites. I know that's eased up a little bit, but there, the reality is that then people have gone, shit, maybe I can look locally. And for us, that's always been our thing. And not, we're not trying to do that. We've always wanted to do that, because the part of Wood Melbourne was always like, no, we're going to keep it local. We're going to basically retail our own product rather than sort of having a middleman or wholesaling. That was a decision we made when we sat down and sort of thought, well, when I say we, it was me and my wife, was more about, like, how do we keep a product that is basically a quality enough product to sell at a good price, like that's something that's not like literally $2,000 or $3,000. And the way we could do that was we do not sell we do not like sell as a wholesaler. We just directly sell. Now, since doing that, we've had a few boutique shops that have approached us, and we have worked out ways that we can on-sell that and keep the retail price the same as ours. But I think that just sort of comes down to clever planning and how you do things. People can still make money, and there are certain ways you can do that. When you hear that people say it's, it is expensive, and I think the thing that scares most of people is when you actually start scratching beneath the surface to see what you've got to do to sell it. You are in competition with Goliaths, and that's sort of where we managed to sort of separate ourselves. We're not in competition with any of those guys. We can't. We'd go under overnight. So we've got a product that doesn't necessarily compete in the market.
It speaks for itself.
It's a one-off. It's made to order. If you want something, black or chrome from a shop, go. I can get it. I can get it through a couple of our suppliers, so it's fine. So I'm also not sort of turning my hand, being snobby and saying we don't do that sort of stuff. We do. We work very, very closely with Parts Apps in Melbourne. Those guys are absolutely fantastic. They make wonderful products. They make some very boutique. I make some products for them, collaborative ones. Insert stone into some of their handles. But I also sell a lot of their products. So I can sort of diversify within that realm, but my main market, that's not what I do. And I think that's sort of where I've been not so much lucky, maybe clever, in the fact that our products are not, you're not going to see, go into Reese and see, some of these whiz-bang shower heads or, whatever they be, and then a set of wooden or concrete handles. But they probably would like them, but they wouldn't buy them from me. They'd have them made in China. That would go for any of the big retailers. Like that's, because we were approached by a few people early on, and the way we said it is, that's our sell price, and that's it. So, they literally, from the big guys, we can't offer a big enough margin. Like that's how I know that's how business works. And you don't have to be a genius to work it out. It's how all business works. But
that's right, and it's also about having morals too, and saying, well, look, this is what I believe in, and this is what I'm passionate about, and I'm happy doing what I do. And as long as the market's there and the demand's there and people are buying and talking about your products right across the industry, well, you're doing something right.
Yeah. And look, we don't sell huge amounts of product. We're a very small boutique thing. We sell enough to keep the business afloat. I drive a Hyundai, just for the record, So, I like the Hyundai. So, there's still, I guess this goes back to business too. I've made a decision a while ago to be, obviously I need to, I've got kids, got a house, you've got to pay your bills. It's just, that's life. But the decision to sort of, I could have just continued subcontracting as a chippy, and you get a fairly healthy paycheck every week. And I don't dislike that. I like that as well. But this is something that I've got a lot of passion in. It gives me my daily plan can sort of work around. Obviously, it works around work because that's where the money comes from. But if I want to take a day off, or I'll probably end up working a Saturday and a Sunday before I take a day off. You know what it's like.
Yeah, of course.
But
yeah,
you do have that flexibility, and it is. I wouldn't say it's a lifestyle choice because the work still comes first. Do you know what I mean? But it does give you somewhat flexibility, and it gives me more control in, let's say I'm 60, I'm not going to still want to be subbing in as a chippy, and let's be honest, not many 60-year-old, as chippies.
You don't see too many around.
You're not climbing up the scaffold like you used to. You know what I mean? You're not sort of swinging from rafters and stuff like you used to. So, I guess that was part of the one of those sort of things that sold me to keep at it and keep it going. And then also, I don't know if I'll be able to do this when I'm 60 either, but I think I'd be better at doing this when I'm 60 than climbing up scaffold. So,
yeah, look, totally true. And I think people listening to this who are contemplating that move, when you do go out and work for yourself, it's not like suddenly it becomes, you're having smoko at 11 a.m. and
you don't have
like
smoko.
You do as a sub, you don't.
You don't have smoko. You work through smoko is what you do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and but the I guess the structure and there is an element of routine, but
yep.
I believe it just becomes part of your life. So then you suddenly don't see it as work. That's in a way. Sometimes you do, but it's like I see it in colours during the day. It's all green, but then there might be an element where it starts to go a bit amber or a bit red, but all in all, your whole life just becomes this different lifestyle.
Yep.
Totally. Of energy.
And I think you have to gear yourself for that too. I think that point you made is something that I've come to terms with in the last few years. I used to really try to say to myself, right, I'm not going to do any work for today, this afternoon, this evening. The reality is, I don't think it's taken me a while to convince myself of this, but I'd go away and say, right, I'm not taking the computer. And the more I sort of think about it now, I'm like, that was just stupid. I love getting emails from people. Do you know what I mean? Yes, it's work. So you're like you're saying, you see it as green, and then at night it's amber or red. But over the last few years, I'm like, no, I'm green the whole time, mate. Hit me.
That's right.
And if I'm up, I'll reply. If I'm not, but really at the end of the day, I think that sort of decision I made was if the email comes through and I'm on the computer, I'm going to reply. And then that, it's just...
Yeah, because it's not work. It's beauty. Here's someone who's, and it might be excitement.
Yeah, exactly. And it sort of gets the blood going and, okay, what are we doing here? Are we doing a quote? What do they want? Do we send out samples? And I think that over the last few years that, this kind of ties all of the things we're talking about, but that you get the email from someone saying, I've seen your product somewhere, love it, give me some more information. And that to me now, I didn't really have time, or maybe I was too bogged into just back when I first started. Now that's actually the start of a journey. And it's not just a journey for me, it's a journey for the purchaser. And this is something that in the last few years, especially, I've learned to sort of embrace, but really sort of also try to give back to the client. So you're about to undergo a journey. So a lot of the clients we've had recently, they'll say, okay, found you on here, love your stuff. We've got a bathroom, send some plans through, whatever. Then the dialogue will start. Okay, what timbers are you using? What colours do you want? I'll send you some samples out, give you some, and then this thing evolves from that first sort of concept drawing from the architect or the owner saying what they want to sort of going down the path into literally sort of evolving almost like its own product. Okay, we're going to make this finish brass for your taps. We're going to do this finish on your shower head. And it's about that customization, and it's really become about sort of a customer journey, I think I sort of call it. And it's about that relationship from the first concept right through to delivery. And having that approach in the last few years of really one-on-oneing with the client. And this sort of goes back to what you cannot get in a major store because they don't have time to do it.
And can I just add to that? You mentioned journey.
Yeah.
These are the conversations where, let's face it, the FPOS card hasn't even come out at that point.
That's
when you're
exactly
meeting with the client.
Yep.
The bank transfer hasn't even happened.
No, you might not have even given them a quote yet.
That's right.
Yeah.
So this is the outlay, the investment, and the only way you're able to do that is because you love doing it.
Yep.
But it hasn't even come into play yet.
No.
It's kind of an afterthought if you want to put it in that respect.
It actually is. And I think that's probably a good way to look at it. That whole journey, as you said, no one's paid for anything yet. And I think really, to be honest with you, I'm kind of not really at that point of thinking, okay, how much is this? First of all, I'll probably be very honest with the clients and sort of let them know, this is, where we're sort of heading, ballpark or whatever. And that does sort of come down later into the quote.
Yeah, sure.
Like that. But I think that a lot of the time when people come to us, they've probably already had a look at the prices. They're probably, and I think like being able to sort of provide that service and also just that ongoing, not so much support, but it's a very one-on-one thing that they're getting. And I've learned to probably love that most out of the whole business is that you're now making relationships with people who are going to every time they're going into their bathroom, they're you've had a part to do with that. And to me that's and it kind of a lot of people think that's fucking stupid, and it's like, well, to me it's not. Like, to me
It's special.
it is sort of special. It becomes part of their home, their story, and people's have a lot of pride in their homes. They and it's very much, it's not just an Aussie thing, but it is definitely, Australians are very house proud, and I think it's something to be proud of. And you
It
have
is.
these sort of little bits of art in your bathroom that they've gone through this whole experience of sort of coming out and seeing stuff, or I've sent them stuff out, and it's evolved to exactly what they want, and maybe with a couple of my twists along the way. I feel kind of honored that I've got like a bit of my art in their house. And it's a, and look, we still get emails from people or follow-up work from people 5-6 years ago that come back, we're doing another one, we're doing this. That sort of makes my heart sing, because people don't come back if it's not good. So it's that's a and that sort of has led on to their friends seeing their place, and so that word of mouth, that, and I think that goes really ties back to something that we were talking about before with the big businesses. They sort of, I think in some ways they'd like to be able to offer that sort of personal touch. I mean, you see this ratus, you can't fucking buy something now without sort of asking to leave a review on, how was your, you just like, what, it was shit, but like, I'm even guilty of that. Like, if we have like relationships with people, I'm like, would you mind leaving us a Google review? I think we've got 5 of them, so it's not high on the priority, but it's nice to, those things all do add up. But yeah, I think really at the end of the day, giving the customer as pleasant an experience and talking them through the whole what we can do is I love it. I really love it. Like, we just did a house recently for a lovely couple in, I think, in Greensboro, where they were having wormy chestnut put throughout everything. So I got some off the furniture maker. We got that all machined down and put into, so all their taps were all done out of the same timber that the vanity was made out of. And, just every step of the way, admittedly, they were fantastic clients, but we were on the same wavelength. So we'd be like, all right, what can we do this? Okay, that toilet roll holder, let's put a little bit of the wormy chestnut on that. What about your shower head? We're definitely wormy on that. And, this thing, and it was just
nice.
like this whole story comes about. He'd come out and check it. We did some rumbled brass on it. It was a little bit too dark. We softened it a little bit more. Like, do you know what I mean? Normally you get it out of the box, but what you got's what you got. So
Yeah, that's right. You don't get a choice.
But I love it. I really sort of, I like that. And I think at the end of the day, because it gives me sort of that satisfaction of knowing that the clients are getting what they want, and I'm able to do that. To me, that there's a large amount of satisfaction that comes from being able to sort of provide what people want.
Yeah, look, I love it, and I'm I'm sure people will be so inspired by this. Listen, because as you know, and I don't need to remind you, but the blood, sweat, and tears that goes in behind it, and you go all the way back, 9 or 10 years ago when you're having that thought and giving it a go, and you've got the products on top of the shelf that didn't work out. And, these are the things that inspire hard workers, battlers, particularly in our country, in Australia, just having a go and putting something out there on the market and willing to stand up and have that honest conversation with someone to say, well, look, this is going to cost a bit of money, but have a look at it. This is what you're getting. There's a story behind it.
That's it. And like, people get it, and some people don't, and that's fine. People that don't get it, it's not. The last thing you want to be is like that pushy sort of secondhand car sales. Come on, buy me bloody taps. But we get people that are super super passionate about our products, and it's so rewarding to me to sort of have fans of Wood Melbourne. It's like fucking awesome.
And also, to be fair too, just to to get another one out there for you, is that you are well renowned outside of Melbourne, so that speaks volumes in itself when you have a product that's called Wood Melbourne.
Yeah, it was a shit choice of name, wasn't it? Really.
But people don't even think, why the hell is it called Wood Melbourne? Because it's just it's a name,
Yep.
and now it's a brand.
Yeah.
It's a well-known market that is deserving of that brand name. So
cheers, mate. Appreciate it.
speaks for itself. No, look, it's been great, and it's been really great talking to you here
Yeah, I've
in
enjoyed
Melbourne.
it. It's
And
fun.
if people listen to this want to get into contact with you, what's the best way to go about it?
Well, Instagram's probably still out. That's visual. You get a bit of, you get to see the products, and so that's probably the best first step. Otherwise, the website is www.woodmelbourne.com, and if you want to, all our contact details are on there. Or if you just want to email us directly, you can email us at hello@woodmelbourne.com.
All right, and your showroom's here in Brunswick.
Yep. So we're open by appointment only now.
So if people want to come have an appointment, have a bit of a look, and
email us first. All the details are on the website too. We will be closing over the Chrissy break. We normally close for 2 or 3 weeks, but if we're around, just email us. It's like I was saying before, I don't actually turn off. Yeah, we close for 3 weeks.
No, you'll have his laptop on.
I'll be going to your unboxing day if you want to come. So. Yeah.
Very good. All right. Well, Ollie from Wood Melbourne, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here on Build Hatch, and really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks, Aaron. Really appreciate it, mate. Good on you.
Well, that was another Build Hatch episode with myself and Ollie from Wood Melbourne. As you heard, we were talking about the barriers and logistical issues which exist in the current building and construction climate. These are exactly the issues that we're about to help resolve shortly. So stay tuned for these exciting new announcements over the coming weeks. We want to help and support the industry and continue to give back. Like I said, stay tuned. And by the way, not that he needs it, but if you are listening to this and you like Wood Melbourne's products, let's give him a Google review because Ollie certainly deserves it. What a character Ollie is, and as you could probably tell, I absolutely love sitting down and talking to Ollie about a lot of things construction. As usual, please check out our Instagram page and other socials where you'll be able to learn more about our guests and some of the features of the work that we talk about. Have a great week, and you'll hear me again on the airwaves next week. Thanks for listening to another episode of Build Hatch.
You have experienced a Build Hatch developed production.